Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Word with Kelly Scott Reed. I'm here with LindaAnn Loschiavo. LindaAnn, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's wonderful to meet you in person.
You know, it's funny because we have published a few pieces of yours in the Loschiavo press, but you had recently sent to me your book, Apprentice to the Night, for me to do a little bit of a review on. And I had procrastinated a bit and due to some life circumstances. And when I finally read it was really profound for me. Could you tell us a little bit about the inspiration for that book?
The inspiration for that book was a contract and a deadline of October 1st. And if that doesn't get you in gear, this was my first book written under contract. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, heady feeling because usually I'm writing and I'm looking for publishers at the same time. And you're always on two different tracks. And all of a sudden, somebody demanded the book by October 1st. And I wrote every single day. One of your questions was about how you cluster it and what you discard. And I didn't do any self-editing in that mode. I waited until I wore my editor's hat. I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And for some reason, just ideas kept coming. People go to sites and look at prompts. I have so many ideas that it wakes me up. Just wakes me up. And I wrote a lot of things that didn't go in the book and will never probably get into a book because they're so different from anything else. For example, I wrote a villanelle that was very moving, very emotional for me, and is scheduled to be published about the Salem witch trials, using the names of some of the victims. And that definitely wasn't going to go in this book.
Yeah. You're not confined to one little space in terms of your writing. You kind of dabble in, I wouldn't say dabble, that's not the right word. You travel in different types of characters. Like you'll go to the vampires and then you'll go to your Italian American side.
Right.
What for you is, like, sometimes we have a favorite, the most fun place to explore our writing. What's the most fun place for you to explore in your writing?
Well, I'm very focused right now on my next book, Dark and Airy Spirits, and all the ghosts that I've had connection with. And that is something that we'll talk about because it leads to Ghost Dance, the poem that you published. Mm-hmm. And I had so many ghost experiences when I was taking care of my mother. It was very exhausting because my mother had two oxygenators going and we had a thermometer in the room and it was 138 degrees every day, even with central air conditioning. And I was on my feet a good 16 to 18 hours. I was the sole caretaker of my mother, even though my father was there. My father was just impossible. He just wanted her to live and not sleep so much. And I was there for palliative care. I'm not a nurse. She was in the hospice phase in her bedroom. And it was so exhausting that one night my aunts came over and they said, okay, get a full night's sleep. We'll stay in her room. And one was on sort of chaise, and the other one was in her bedroom, her two sisters. And I'm trying to sleep, and a ghost comes into my room. And the ghost sounds like James Earl Jones and says to me, go. And I told the ghost, get out of here. This is my night to sleep. Leave. I am not getting out of this bed. And the ghost said, go. And persisted saying one word, louder and louder, until I got up, put on my slippers, went into my mother's room to find out that she had ripped out the oxygen tubes and thrown them under the bed. She had never done that before. And she would have been dead by morning. And it obviously was not her time to die. And I was sent into the room. And the room, my parents had a very large house in Clearwater, Florida. And I was all on the other side of the room by the garage. I was several rooms away. I would not have heard a disruption in breathing. And my aunts were right there. And they would have felt tremendously guilty knowing that they were watching inadequately and harm came to her and they didn't even interfere. So the ghost, I don't know if the ghost came to them, but the ghost certainly came to me.
Maybe you just are the one that listened in that someone, but that's incredible. Why don't you read Ghost? Do you have it with you? Ghost poem that you said?
I have it. I haven't printed it out, but it's, I believe it's in the book.
Yeah.
You have the manuscript, right?
I do. I do.
Okay. It's the one where it says the Grim Reaper arrived early.
Yeah.
The sonnet about that. And there's a wonderful illustration of that for dark and airy spirits with the ghost sitting with me, with my mother. A lot of people don't know what ghosts look like. So there's a poem that real ghosts don't wear bed sheets. And what do ghosts look like? They look like us, but they're transparent and you can never see facial features on a ghost.
That is so interesting. I mean, you talk about ghosts and in some of your writing, you've delved into all different types of the, vampires or witches. What started you down that path of fascination? When did this all begin for you for your writing?
When I was 3.5 years old, we were living in a large household, grandparents, unmarried aunts, and so forth. My parents couldn't afford to buy a house at that time. And a lot of greeting cards came to the household. Hallmark, June, moon, spoon. I used to read these greeting cards and I used to say, this is outrageous. This is pathetic. This is bad poetry. The whole idea of the mass market greeting card meant for this generic person coming to one of my relatives. How did this have any relevance? How did this have any charm? I couldn't see how this Hallmark business was going and people were buying these preposterous bad poetry cards. So I started my own greeting card line. I'm just going to take a sip of water.
Okay. Oh, wow. All right.
I was 3.5 years old and my aunt was an illustrator. And we had very good paper in the house that my aunts brought home from their offices and so forth. And I started my own greeting card line. We gave the cards away. It was not an income producing model, but everybody loved the cards. So a formalist was born.
Oh, that is fantastic. Do you still have any of your old greeting cards? Did you save any?
They were given away.
Oh,
right.
They have like a prototype. Oh no.
Right. Yeah. They were one of a kind originals. And I don't know if anybody kept them, but we got a lot of praise for them, my aunt and myself. And it was really wonderful to feel I touched people with my words. I was 3.5 years old.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So by the time I was 4 years old, I was being taken to Broadway shows regularly. So my next foray into writing was being a playwright. And I wrote my first one-act play when I was 9 years old. And it was a combination of girls from my Girl Scout troop and from my choir. And we rehearsed in my basement. And I had this really crappy manual typewriter, really the pits. And I didn't know about photocopying or anything. So I typed the play 6 times, one for every girl and for me. And the first rule was they had to show up at rehearsal. And the second rule was that they must never lose the script because I wasn't going to retype it.
That is fantastic. What an
Yes, fantastic. Typing it 6 times was really, I mean, it just shows you how committed I was to it. So we had it on stage. It was a 1-act play with a unit set. It was 45 minutes long, and it ran for 11 months in Brooklyn.
That is absolutely fantastic.
It was.
What was it about?
It was called New Little Women. I was very obsessed with Louisa May Alcott, and I felt that there wasn't enough dialogue in the book. So I used those characters, the 4 girls, the March Girls, and Marmee. Unit set, rocking chair. Only Marmee got to sit down with a little rug that I borrowed. And it was about their relationships, which were in the book, but with more interaction, because remember, it's a unit set, so they're not leaving that living room. And it was very inspiring because all of those characters are women with different life stories. Ultimately, the trajectory. Beth gets sick, and Joe goes on to be a writer. And it was performed by various Girl Scout troops in the New York City area for 11 months.
That's really incredible. It's funny you should mention Little Women. When I was younger and discovered that book, Little Women in particular, I would read it over and over again and put myself as each woman. I don't know if that was an experience that you had, just reading it once as Meg and once as Joe,
Sure.
or Beth.
Sure. And then I wrote all those monologues for them.
Ooh, I'd love to see that. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it was very fulfilling. The first time I stood on stage and got all that applause from just strangers, mostly mothers and Scout troop leaders, of course, and relatives of the girls. My parents did not attend any performances, but strangers clapped for me.
So, what perspectives or beliefs do you challenge with your work, do you think? Just in general, or you can get specific with like your current book of poetry.
Well, one of the things I want people to come away with in a gentle way, because the ghosts I talk about are family ghosts, my mother dying, and of course my uncle held weekly poker games in a violently poltergeist infested house and used to tell us the stories. I mean, his time had passed having his meetings in the haunted house, but the whole family, my mother and her sisters, knew all about the house on President Street, and he used to relive it. And I used to ponder what creates a poltergeist infested house. And another thing that happened when I was a child was that my parents used to telepath to each other. My mother would have no access to my father. He didn't have phones where he worked. He was in a naval shipyard. He didn't have an office job. He had a very physical job. And at 12 noon, my mother would go in a corner and say, "Be quiet, I have to talk to your father." And my parents would exchange vital information, because when my father would come home, he'd say, "Oh, I bought the whatever that you wanted. I brought it home." Or they would talk about playing certain numbers, various things. So my parents bought me the object I really wanted the most at age 11. I got my own phonograph, and I could play my own opera records, my own classical waltzes, and I was very happy. And 3 weeks later, it went on fire. And my father had to take it back to the distributor in New Jersey and was complaining, carrying on, it was going to ruin his weekend, and da, 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 da. So my father pulls away with the car, and he's got the phonograph in the trunk. And we realized that all the paperwork is on the coffee table. The sales receipt, the receipt for the warranty, everything is there. And my mother screams at me and she says, "Call Daddy, tell him to come home." And there obviously was no mobile phone at the time. And she meant, speak to daddy, make him come home. She didn't give me any instructions. She didn't say why she wasn't doing it since she regularly spoke to him. So I telepathed to my father and he came home. And that was very empowering to know that I could speak to people wherever they are and reach them. And I was 11 years old and I've been telepathing ever since. So I've had some interesting conversations with the living and with the dead.
Oh, LindaAnn, that's really interesting. Now, you write a lot about that in your writing.
Yes.
Is there ever a time where when you're writing and you're writing about your own personal experience, that you remember something on the spot, something reveals itself to you as you're writing, that you didn't remember in the moment, that so you're kind of, do you rediscover the stories that you write, is basically what I'm saying, as you're writing them?
Yes, I rediscovered them for a very good reason, because I kept all of this side of my life completely out of my writing for most of my life and didn't start writing about this at all until the pandemic. Everybody was dying, and I said, maybe it's time to bring the dead into my pages. And there they came. And I had a lot of experiences that I never shared with anyone, never wrote about, never really thought that another person would understand. And then I said, maybe people can understand this. And I started putting it into my writing. One of the poems in the book, of course, is My Dungeon Ghost. And that's a really interesting story, because this was a fellow I knew in Catholic elementary school who was a tremendous influence on me, changed my writing. We were both real library nerds. We both read a lot of books, but I was not reading medieval poetry, and he was. And he introduced me to Mallory's Morte d'Arthur. And that started me on Chaucer, Froissart, all of the medieval poets, and the legend of King Arthur, etc. And it was really life-changing, so life-changing that I got my first graduate degree in medieval literature. But after we left grammar school, even though it was so life-changing, this friendship, I never gave this fellow one thought. I never thought, oh, where is he? What is he doing? All of a sudden, I have a play on stage, and it's a very complex play. I have it on stage on 34th Street at Proshansky Auditorium. It's a big production. And he starts telepathing to me. Now, this is decades after we've left grammar school. And I have no bandwidth to pay attention to him. So he kept trying to contact me, and I'm totally focused on the play. It was a cast of 8. It was all kinds of razzmatazz going on with the play. And finally, after 3 weeks, I can pay attention to him. And I realize he's in Broward County Prison in Florida for murder for hire. So this is what he was doing while I was going on, being a writer, being an editor, getting very involved in the literary scene. He was killing people as a paid assassin. And he telepathed to me because he knew he was dying. But actually, by the time we connected, I didn't realize it, because ghosts don't tell you, oh, by the way, LindaAnn, I'm 6 feet under right now. I'm not really sitting in my cell. The way I found out that he was actually dead was I called the prison. I wanted to see if I could help, if I could put money in his account. And the person who answered said, oh, he's no longer here. Now, I knew he was serving life. And then she said, he's dead. Nobody claimed the body, and the prisoners buried him. So I said, well, how can I get in touch? And she said, oh, here's the number of the chaplain. Call the chaplain, because he's no longer with the Bureau of Prisons anymore. He's with the chaplain's office. He's their responsibility. So I spoke to the chaplain, And he told me when he died and that he had a heart attack in his cell and so forth. But my friend continued to talk to me, and he had a last request. And I had to fulfill that request and forgive him so that he would rest in peace. And that's what the poem is about, my dungeon ghost.
Mm. And that's amazing. Could you answer one more question for us before we let you go? Describe a time in your life when you realized that language had power.
Well, 3 times, because the cards that I was doing at age 3.5 had power. And when I stood on the stage at 9.5 years old and people clapped so thunderously for me, I knew my words had reached them. Of course, they're clapping for the actresses too, but I completely disregarded that. I felt it was my words. And then when I was in high school, I started writing complaint letters for my parents, and they were extremely effective. We got the refund, we got the satisfaction. And I knew the pen truly is mightier than the sword, because nobody realized this was coming from a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old. And we were getting everything we wanted because of these letters. So yes, words have power. Did you want me to read that poem?
I would love it.
Okay. This is Ghost Dance, based on true events with a true ghost. That year, morphine became a minuet, sweet pianissimo. Its soft petals stilled anguish, reproached relentless timekeeping. Tick, tick, mortality's metronome. Before my mother died at home, she learned that cancer's like a Depression-era endurance contest, the dance marathon. Odds stacked against her, swaying in slow mode. Despite defiant hair, a plump physique deceiving guests, illness hokey-pokeyed her organs, shook breasts off, rumba'd her cells, vitality, an unremembered song. Mere noise until sweet exhalation ceased. Her corpse was wheeled away. The tempo changed. Dynamic force reclaimed the rooms and firm no longer. Energy expressed intent, as if mom were at a debutante's ball, star of the show, sequined, applauded. The mind's embracers, freed from pain's embrace, seek entertainment, longing to erase what's real, belonging to another realm where everyone's transparent. Mom's got plans, she's telepath. But first, she wants to dance. Coldness sidles up to take my hand.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you for publishing the poem.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. And I wrote a review that will appear in one of our presses when this, probably to coordinate with this interview, it would be nice, because I think it's I hope you liked the review.
Yes, yes.
Publicly.
Very, very insightful how something written in my room can reach across the realm of New York and touch someone else's life and resonate. That's the power of words, right?
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yes, I hope so. Thanks for the opportunity. Bye.